Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I never imagined something as simple as house sitting could shake me so deeply, or change the way I looked at people, and even myself. To explain why it left such a mark, I need to start with where I came from. My childhood wasn't just unstable, it was like living on shifting ground, never knowing when it would crack beneath me. My dad was gone before I was old enough to remember him. My mom tried. I know she did, but her fear of being alone consumed her. She chased companionship the way some people chase air, through bars, smoky nights, and men who barely remembered her name in the morning. I grew up watching strangers stumble into our house, men with the stench of whiskey on their breath, anger in their eyes, or defeat carved into their faces. None of them stayed long, but the chaos did. The fights were constant, sometimes just sharp words that ricocheted off the walls, sometimes worse. I can still feel the sound of her screaming in my bones, the way it made me curl under my blanket, pressing my hands over my ears. I hated confrontation. I learned early to smooth things over, to be agreeable, to anticipate moods before they exploded. By the time I reached college, I was a professional at swallowing my own needs to keep everyone else calm. But it came with panic attacks, shaking hands, and a stomach that nodded every time voices rose too high. I had a degree, but that didn't mean stability. I bounced between part-time jobs, patching together rent money while holding my fragile nerves together with duct tape. That's when a friend mentioned house sitting. "It's easy," she said, laughing like it was the best-kept secret in the world. Get paid to sit in someone's house, check the mail, feed their pets, and relax. To me, after years of noise and tension, it sounded like therapy. My first 2 jobs went smoothly, little slices of quiet that felt like stolen treasure. But the third one, mid-2016, that one left a scar I still feel like a bruise beneath my skin. The house was in Riverview, Oregon, a few hours' drive from home. The owner, David Morgan, called me the day before, apologizing for the short notice. He spoke quickly, clipped but polite, like his mind was already in 2 other places. "It's simple," he assured me. "Feed my dog, keep an eye on the place, sign for a couple of packages, 3 nights, that's it." The dog, Bart, turned out to be a massive St. Bernard mix. When I first walked in, he gave me one half-hearted sniff, then collapsed back onto his bed with a sigh big enough to rattle the floor. David scratched Bart's ears with one hand while checking his watch with the other. He seemed kind, but distracted, like a man with deadlines breathing down his neck. The house was modern, tucked behind tall trees that walled it off from the world. Quiet, private, the kind of place that should have felt like refuge. "Bart's friendly but protective," David said, giving the dog's head another pat. "You won't have any problems with him." I smiled, though the nerves in my stomach made me chew the inside of my cheek. 3 nights. I told myself it would be easy. After a quick walkthrough, a few papers signed, and a set of keys exchanged, David was gone. That first day unfolded like a balm. The house was spotless, almost sterile, like no one really lived there. But the backyard patio was a dream. Bart and I stretched out under the shade while a soft breeze cooled the summer air. For the first time in weeks, I felt my chest loosen, like I could breathe without fighting for it. That night I ordered pizza, curled up with Bart on the couch, and put on a Netflix movie. The silence around the house wasn't heavy. It was soothing, like the quiet hum of safety I'd always wanted. For a while it felt perfect, until the doorbell started ringing. At first I thought it might be a late delivery, but it didn't stop at one polite chime. Whoever stood outside pressed it again, then again, and again. The bell screamed through the house in relentless bursts, each shrill note stabbing straight through my nerves. My hands froze around the blanket. My mom's voice echoed in my head. "Never open the door after dark, especially in neighborhoods you don't know." But the bell didn't stop. It grew frantic, violent, like the person's finger was welded to the button. My anxiety surged with every ring, whispering that ignoring it would only make things worse. My heart hammered as I stood, legs trembling, and forced myself toward the door. When I opened it, I found myself face to face with a woman who looked like a storm-given flesh. Her posture screamed hostility, arms folded tight across her chest, jaw locked, eyes blazing with the kind of fury that makes you take a step back without even realizing it. She looked late 30s, maybe early 40s. Her hair was yanked back into a ponytail so severe it seemed painful, the tension in her face amplifying her anger. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice clipped like a blade. Who?" I asked, shrinking into myself before I could stop it. My throat went dry. "Don't play stupid, David. Where is he?" I froze. For a second my brain stalled, and then I managed to stammer. He's out of town, business trip." "Don't lie to me." Her voice cracked the air like glass shattering. "He's here, isn't he? Tell him to stop hiding behind you." "I swear he's not here." My voice betrayed me, trembling despite everything in me screaming to sound calm. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion hardening into contempt. "Oh, I see how it is. You're the new one. His little girlfriend." The words hit like ice water down my spine. My stomach dropped hollow. No, I'm just house-sitting," I said quickly, shaking my head. She stepped forward, invading my space, her breath sharp with bitterness. "You think I don't know? He does this, sneaks around, brings women into our house." Bart appeared behind me without a sound, his massive frame filling the hallway like a shadow come alive. A low growl rolled from his chest, deep and resonant, like distant thunder. The woman jabbed a finger at me, spitting curses too venomous to repeat. Bart's growl exploded into furious barking, the sound bouncing off the walls, vibrating through my ribs. My chest tightened. My vision blurred at the edges. The panic attack gripped me, fingers tingling, throat clamped shut. "Get him out here," she screamed, voice cracking. I told you he's gone." My voice splintered under the pressure. Something in my words broke her. She lunged, shoving toward the doorway. Bart erupted. He hurled himself at the frame, teeth bared, bark blasting like a shotgun. I reacted on pure instinct, slamming the door shut just as she stumbled back, shrieking. Her fists hammered against the wood. "You can't hide forever, David." I slid down the door, legs giving out, my whole body trembling so violently I thought I might faint. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Bart stayed at the door, every muscle taut, his eyes locked forward, chest rising and falling in heavy bursts. Minutes stretched into an eternity before I managed to call 911. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone, but the dispatcher's calm, steady voice anchored me, pulling me through the storm until the flashing lights finally cut through the dark outside. When the officers arrived, she was still out there, pacing, shouting, like a caged animal ready to break loose. I stayed pressed against the door as they restrained her. One officer knocked gently, his tone soft. "Ma'am, you're safe now." I cracked the door open just enough to peek. They were leading her toward the patrol car. Her eyes caught mine, locking with a venom that made my stomach churn. "This isn't over," she screamed, fighting against their grip. I flinched, Bart growling low, his body rigid at my side. The officer promised she'd be taken in, though he never said if charges would actually stick. His words were meant to reassure, but instead they felt paper thin, like promises that dissolve in rain. Later, when David finally returned my call, his voice was thick with apologies. "God, I'm so sorry. That must have been terrifying." "Who was she?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. He sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "Her name's Melissa. We dated on and off. She's jealous, controlling. I thought I'd made it clear it was over." "Does she know where you live?" I pressed, my voice sharp with disbelief. "Apparently," he admitted, letting out a nervous chuckle. I never thought she'd actually come here. I should have warned you. My chest burned, fury climbing my throat. I wanted to scream at him, tell him how close his negligence came to destroying me. Instead, I whispered, voice cracking, "She tried to attack me." Silence stretched. Then, almost pleading, he said, "Please don't quit. Bart needs someone. I'll double your pay." And like clockwork, the old people pleaser in me folded. Bart had stood between me and danger, his body the only barrier between me and her rage. Walking away from him felt wrong. So I stayed. The next 2 nights dragged by, every creak of the house a potential threat. Melissa didn't return, but Bart never left my side. He slept at the foot of the couch, lifting his head at every sound. His steady presence the only thing keeping me tethered. When David finally came back, he avoided my eyes. His apologies were mumbled, shallow, as he handed me an envelope of cash. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying, for protecting Bart." I nodded, though a quiet fury pulsed in my chest, sharp and unspoken. Kneeling to hug Bart goodbye, I buried my face in his fur. "You were the only good thing here," I whispered. He licked my cheek, and tears stung my eyes. I left that morning knowing it would be my last house-sitting job. The peace I'd been searching for had been shattered by someone else's chaos. I never saw Bart again, but sometimes, when the darkness presses in and panic claws at my chest, I imagine him there, his massive body planted in front of me, shielding me from the storm. And then I wonder, what if, next time, there isn't a Bart to protect me? I grew up in a small town in southern Illinois, the kind of place people usually describe as safe, quiet, even idyllic. To me, though, it was never any of those things. My earliest years were painted in shades of instability, voices raised in sharp arguments that bled through paper-thin apartment walls, nights spent bracing for the next slammed door, the next explosion. There was always this tension, like holding your breath and waiting for something you couldn't name but knew was coming. My mom, Denise, was barely more than a kid herself when she had me, 19 and already exhausted by life. My dad was gone before I could hold more than a blur of memories of him. He wasn't perfect, not by a long shot, but when I think of him, I remember calmness, rational words, hands that didn't shake with anger or reek of alcohol. He was flawed, sure, but he wasn't chaos. My mom, on the other hand, was restless, always looking for someone to fix her, to make her feel whole. Men came and went like seasons in our house. Some were forgettable, others mean drunks, a few just broken in quiet ways. Then there was Trevor. From the start, something about him put me on edge. He had these washed-out blue eyes, sharp and empty, like he was always doing math in his head, calculating people instead of caring about them. He wasn't loud or explosive at first. Quite the opposite. He was charming in a practiced way, joking with neighbors, tightening loose doorknobs, tossing us kids a little kindness like spare change. Once he even took me and my little sister Emily out for ice cream, smiling like some sitcom stepdad. But that smile never reached his eyes. And Mom, I think she saw it too. I think she knew the mask would slip eventually. But loneliness to her was worse than danger. Worse than Trevor. I was 11 when it all curdled into something I couldn't ignore. It was late October, one of those nights when the air cut your lungs and your shoes crunched leaves to dust. Emily was 7, buzzing with excitement, spinning in her princess costume until the hem frayed. For weeks she'd been chirping about candy, about which houses gave out the good stuff. Trick-or-treating with her was the one time I felt like her protector, instead of just another kid in the storm. Those few hours under the streetlights, laughing at goofy decorations, comparing candy bars, it was our brief escape from the suffocating tension of home. That year we did well. Our bags bulged with candy, and Emily was dragging her feet by the time we climbed the cracked concrete steps back to the house. That's when I noticed it. The porch light was out. Mom never left it off, not even when she was working late. My chest tightened. I pushed the door open. Trevor stood there in the living room. His face was flushed, jaw locked so hard I thought it might shatter. He didn't speak to Emily, didn't smile, just looked at her in this way that made her shrink back instantly. Without a word, she scurried toward her room. I shoved my candy bag into her hands, whispering, "It's okay, just go." When I turned, Trevor's eyes were already on me. He motioned with 2 fingers, curt, sharp. "Come on." My stomach nodded. "Why? We're not even late." He didn't answer, just turned and walked toward the garage, his boots heavy against the linoleum. The way his shoulders moved, tense, deliberate, made my throat go dry. I followed, each step reluctant, my pulse drumming in my ears. In the garage, the smell of oil and damp concrete pressed close. Trevor grabbed something from a shelf and shoved it into my chest, a pair of stiff work gloves, then a folded black trash bag. I stared at them, my fingers numb around the plastic. "What's this for?" My voice cracked, thin. Trevor didn't look at me, didn't blink, just stood there, the silence stretching like a noose. He grabbed the shovel leaning against the wall like it had been waiting for him, then slid a small hatchet into his belt without a word. The silence was worse than shouting. It was heavy, deliberate, and it wrapped around me like a threat. We crossed the backyard, past the rusted swing set no one touched anymore, its chains rattling faintly in the breeze. The grass gave way to dirt, then to the tangle of trees that bordered our property. The deeper we pushed into the woods, the colder it seemed to get. Shadows swallowed the path until the only light came from a thin slice of moon breaking through the branches. My chest ached with every heartbeat. Finally, in a small clearing, Trevor stopped. He turned abruptly and slammed the shovel into my chest hard enough to make me stumble. His voice was flat, stripped of emotion. "Dig." I blinked at him. "Dig what?" "Just dig." The way he said it, sharp like a snapped bone, cut deeper than if he'd screamed. My throat tightened. I forced the shovel into the dirt, scooping clumps of earth. The metal felt too heavy, too big for my 11-year-old arms. My hands shook, my palms burning from the rough handle. I tried to steady my breathing, but it kept breaking in shallow gasps. After a few minutes, Trevor crouched down beside me. The reek of whiskey hit me first, sour and suffocating. His voice slid into my ear. "You want to know why you're digging?" "Yes," I whispered. He leaned closer, the moon catching in his pale eyes, making him look wrong, almost inhuman. His lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Because if things don't go my way," he murmured, "this is where you're going to end up." The shovel slipped from my hands, clattering against the roots. My whole body froze. "What?" "You heard me?" His tone was calm, steady, too calm. "Your dad's got that custody hearing in 2 weeks. If he wins, you and your sister go live with him. And I lose everything. That's not happening, you understand me?" I swallowed hard, my throat raw. "But I don't control that." His eyes narrowed, and he tapped the hatchet against his palm, slow and deliberate. "You better figure out how, because if I lose, you lose. Simple as that." I wanted to scream, to bolt into the trees, but my legs wouldn't move. Fear had me nailed to the spot. It wasn't new. I'd been swallowing fear for years, but never like this. This one pressed down on me, heavy, permanent. When he finally told me to cover the hole back up, I didn't ask why. I already knew. I filled the dirt back in with shaking hands, the sound of soil hitting soil louder than anything else in the clearing. He didn't explain, didn't need to. We walked back to the house in silence. Only the crunch of dead leaves under our feet reminded me the world outside still existed, that this wasn't just some nightmare. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Emily was asleep in the next room, her candy spread across the carpet like a dragon's hoard, her little breaths steady and innocent. I kept replaying the sound of the shovel, the way Trevor's eyes had glinted. How close I'd come to vanishing forever in that patch of woods. 2 weeks later, the custody hearing came. My dad won. The judge barely blinked after seeing Trevor's record. Bar fights, DUIs, domestic calls stacked like evidence of who he really was. Mom stared at the floor the whole time, silent, while Trevor seethed beside her, his jaw twitching with each word the judge spoke. When it ended, Dad drove me and Emily to his new apartment across town. We never saw Trevor again. Mom refused to leave him, and over time, her phone calls slowed until they stopped completely. Sometimes, when I think back to that night, I wonder if Trevor truly would have gone through with it, if that hole was meant to be my grave, or if he just wanted to carve fear so deep into me I'd never speak up. But it doesn't matter. The damage was done. That night taught me a truth I'll never unlearn. Monsters don't hide under your bed. They sit at your kitchen table, drink from your glasses, and wait for the dark. And when I was 11 years old, I dug my own grave because the man who should have protected me was the same man who wanted to bury me in it. I never imagined I'd end up in the kind of relationship people lower their voices to talk about, the kind you see on late-night true crime specials, the kind wrapped in warnings and red flags you always assume you'd spot from a mile away. If someone had asked me even 3 years ago, I would have said I was too sharp, too independent, too stubborn to ever get caught in something like that. But it doesn't happen like a lightning strike. It seeps in, one drop at a time, until you're soaked without realizing it. At first, it's just a drip you ignore. Then another. You convince yourself it's nothing. And then one day the ceiling collapses on you. My name is Elena Vargas. This happened in New Haven, Connecticut, a small city I once thought of as a fresh start after dragging myself out of a humiliating college breakup. I was working remotely for a mid-sized publishing company, editing manuscripts and writing marketing blurbs, which meant most of my days bled into each other. My apartment was a third-floor walk-up in an old brick building with radiators that clanked at night and windows that let in too much winter wind. Not glamorous, but it was mine. I kept telling myself I was rebuilding piece by piece, and for a while I believed it. That's when Adrian Hall appeared. He wasn't the kind of man who swept into a room and owned it. No flashy grin, no overwhelming charm. He leaned in when you spoke, eyes fixed as if nothing else in the world mattered. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, and at first it was just polite conversation. He asked what I did for work, and when I said publishing, he didn't zone out or glance at his phone like most guys did. He asked follow-up questions. He actually listened. After years of men pretending to care, that felt rare. Over the next few weeks, I started seeing him more often. At group hangouts, grabbing coffee with mutual friends, then sliding into my texts. At first, it was light. How's your day? Then it turned into, what are you doing right now? And eventually, why didn't you text me back? I brushed it off as flattering. Who doesn't want to feel wanted? When we officially began dating, it felt like slipping into a routine I hadn't realized I'd been craving. He cooked for me, brought flowers to my apartment, just because, remembered small details I barely remembered telling him. My mom, who'd been nagging me for years to find someone stable, adored the sound of him over the phone. My friends thought he was sweet, and for the first time in a long time I thought maybe I'd finally gotten something right. But Adrian had a way of weaving himself into my life so quietly that I didn't notice how much of it he was taking over. The first crack appeared about 3 months in. One evening he dropped by unannounced while I was on FaceTime with my younger brother Diego, who lived in Florida. Adrian sat beside me on the couch, silent at first, but the longer I laughed and chatted with Diego, the more I felt his energy shift. His fingers tapped against his knee, his jaw tightened. When I hung up, he said softly, "You talk to him a lot." I smiled, not getting it. "Yeah, he's my brother." "That's good," he said, but his expression didn't match the words. His eyes looked flat, calculating, It's just, you seemed more excited talking to him than you ever do with me. I laughed awkwardly, brushed it off as a weird comment, but it stuck with me. It was the first time I noticed how his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The second crack came soon after, when my friend Lana got promoted and planned a girls' night to celebrate at a rooftop bar. When I told Adrian, he frowned. "I don't like that idea," he said. "Why not?" I asked, half laughing. "Those places are crawling with creeps. You know how men are when they're drunk. I'd rather you didn't go." I rolled my eyes. "Adrian, it's just my friends. You're overthinking it." He didn't argue further. He just gave a small nod and said, "If you really want to go, go. Just don't be surprised if I don't answer when you call later." That night, when I texted him, he ignored me. My calls went straight to voicemail. I lay awake, heart pounding, convinced something awful had happened to him. Finally, at 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Glad you had fun without me." And that became a pattern. Restrictions dressed up as concern. "Don't wear that dress. It's too revealing." "Don't drink too much, you know how you get." "Don't post that photo, it's not a good look for you." Each rule sounded small on its own, but they piled up, drip after drip, and before I realized it, I was drenched. "People don't need to see you like that." That's how he always phrased it. Framed as protection, never control. But each time he said it, I felt myself shrinking a little smaller, like he was trimming away pieces of me until only what he wanted was left. The worst part wasn't Adrian's anger, though when it came it was sharp and sudden, like a blade. No, what terrified me most was the silence. The way he'd stare, unblinking, his eyes heavy and dissecting like I was a specimen pinned beneath glass. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and find him sitting up in bed watching me. "Why are you awake?" I'd whisper, my throat tight. "Just making sure you're still here," he'd murmur before lying back down as if it were nothing. At first I told myself it was strange, but oddly romantic, like something out of a gothic novel. But over time, the charm soured. It stopped feeling like devotion and started feeling like surveillance. The turning point came one chilly afternoon in late October. I'd been editing a manuscript all morning when a knock sounded at my apartment door. It was Mrs. Callahan, my elderly neighbor from across the hall, a retired teacher with a soft voice and a kindness that reminded me of my grandmother. She smiled warmly, holding out a plate of cookies. "I haven't seen you in a while, Elena," she said. "You okay?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Adrian materialized behind me, his hand clamped firmly onto my shoulder. "She's fine," he said smoothly, smiling the way a politician smiles. "We've just been busy." Mrs. Callahan's smile wavered. Her eyes flicked to me, searching for confirmation. Adrian's grip tightened, almost imperceptibly, and all I could do was nod. When I closed the door, I exhaled shakily. "You didn't need to do that," I told him. "Do what?" His head tilted, feigning confusion. "Answer for me." He smiled faintly. "I'm just looking out for you." But that night, I couldn't shake Mrs. Callahan's expression, the concern in her eyes, the pity. It was like she knew something I hadn't let myself admit yet. The real horror wasn't just his control or the way he isolated me. It was how much of myself I'd let slip away before I noticed. I stopped calling Diego as often. I canceled plans with friends. My hobbies gathered dust in the corners of my apartment. One morning I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked small, worn out, hollow. The breaking point came in November. I was scheduled to give a short talk at a local library about editing and publishing, a minor event, nothing I'd even thought to share in detail. But when I stepped up to the podium, there he was, Adrian, sitting in the back row. His eyes locked on me, unwavering the entire time. Afterward, he cornered me outside. "Why didn't you want me here?" he demanded, his voice low and tight. It wasn't about you, I snapped, my nerves frayed. It was my work. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his breath. Everything about you is about me, Elena. Don't you get that? Something inside me cracked. For the first time in months, I pushed back, literally. I shoved him hard and walked away, trembling. That night, I didn't sleep. My phone buzzed until dawn, message after message, apologies, please, threats. You don't understand how much I need you. If you leave me, I don't know what I'll do. I can't live without you, Elena. By morning, my decision was made. I packed a bag with shaking hands, called Diego, and told him everything. My voice broke as I admitted how scared I was. He didn't hesitate. He booked me a flight and said, "Come home now." Leaving wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming confrontations, no police lights flashing outside. I slipped out in the early morning, the hallways quiet, my bag digging into my shoulder. My heart felt heavier than the suitcase. I didn't leave a note. Adrian called me 73 times that day. 73. By the time my plane landed, I'd blocked his number. Still, for weeks afterward, every knock at the door made me flinch. Every unknown number sent a cold wave through my stomach. Therapy helped slowly. Rebuilding trust in myself helped more. But looking back, the scariest part isn't what Adrian did. It's how easily I let myself believe his version of love was normal. That's what toxic relationships do. They don't just trap you inside someone else's nightmare. They convince you it's your home. And even now, some nights I still wake up suddenly, heart racing, certain someone is sitting in the dark, watching me breathe. I always thought of myself as the kind of person who slipped through life unnoticed. Not invisible exactly, just forgettable. I wasn't the girl people remembered after a party, or the one boys whispered about. If I stood out at all, it was usually for the wrong reasons. Growing up in a small Arizona town called Winslow taught me that kids can be vicious when they smell weakness. By the time I was 12, I already carried around nicknames that clung to me like burrs. Horseface, lopsided, misfrown. Most of them were aimed at my lips, fuller than most girls, with one side tilting downward, giving me a permanent half scowl. I laughed it off in public, but every trip to the mirror was just another silent verdict that maybe they were right. My mom, a nurse who raised me almost entirely on her own, did her best to soften the blows. After one particularly brutal day at school, she sat me down, brushing my hair back as if that alone could shield me. "Marina, your features are unique. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise," she'd say, her voice steady, though her eyes always carried worry. But when you're a teenager desperate to disappear into sameness, unique feels like just another synonym for ugly. By the time I left for Northern Arizona University at 19, I'd mastered the art of walls. I didn't go to parties, didn't join clubs, didn't risk rejection. I poured myself into psychology, partly because I wanted to understand people, but mostly because I was still trying to understand myself, why the sting of exclusion always seemed to follow me like a shadow that never loosened its grip. That's when he entered my life. Adrian Blake. It was the first week of classes, a late summer morning still warm enough to make the air shimmer. I'd chosen a seat near the back of the lecture hall, hoping to vanish into the sea of strangers. My pen scratched across the page, dutiful, mechanical, when a voice leaned in close and broke my rhythm. "You have really pretty eyes." I froze, the pen dangling above paper like it no longer knew what to do. Slowly I turned. He was smiling, tall, lean, with messy brown hair that looked like he'd just rolled out of bed. His green eyes caught the light in a way that felt too direct, too observant, like he saw something no one else ever had. "Sorry?" I whispered, cheeks heating as I dropped my gaze back to the notebook. Compliments had always made me uneasy. especially the kind that felt undeserved. He didn't retreat. He leaned in just enough to be heard. I mean it. They're the kind of eyes that make people listen. I almost laughed out loud at the absurdity. Me? The same eyes kids mocked for years? I wanted to brush him off, to bury myself in indifference. Instead, I just gave a small, awkward nod and kept writing. But he kept showing up. Every class, every lecture, sliding into the seat beside me as though it belonged to him. Some mornings he handed me a coffee without asking. Other times, he offered me his notes when mine trailed off. And every single day he told me I was pretty. At first it grated on me. It felt like he was prying open doors I had nailed shut long ago. But his persistence was disarming. Bit by bit, the armor I had wrapped around myself began to crack. My mom's voice had always sounded hollow when she told me to love myself. But when Adrian said my eyes were striking, or my hair caught the light, or my lips were soft, I caught myself wanting, aching, to believe him. And I started to change. Small things at first. A softer sweater here, jeans that actually fit instead of swallowing me whole. I dabbled with makeup, tracing over my lips, trying to tilt the balance, to hide the asymmetry. I even bought hazel contact lenses, subtle enough to draw out the green flecks he claimed to love. One night I lingered in front of the mirror, staring at the girl staring back. She didn't quite look like me, and for once that felt like a blessing. When Adrian noticed, his smile stretched wide, victorious. "See? I told you. You're beautiful." God, I wanted that to be true. I wanted it so badly that it hurt. And then in March, 6 months after that first morning, it happened. I opened my locker in the psychology building and froze. Tucked between my textbooks was a folded piece of paper. My name scribbled in Adrian's neat handwriting. "Be mine, Marina." Adrian. My heart jumped, a fluttering thing in my chest. For a fleeting second, I smiled, daring to hope. But the old voice inside me returned, sharp and cruel. Ugly girlfriend, joke, laughing stock. The words sank like stones. That evening, he found me outside the library, leaning casually against the brick wall as if he owned the world. "So, what's your answer?" His green eyes searched mine, patient yet intense. I stared at the pavement, fingers curled around my backpack strap. "Adrian, I can't. I don't want to be the girl your friends whisper about. I don't want to be ugly." He reached for my hand, his grip firm but gentle. "You're not ugly, Marina," he said softly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "You're the only girl I see. I don't care what anyone else thinks." I didn't respond. I just let him pull me into a hug, my chest aching with an impossible mix of fear and longing. By April, I'd given in. I said yes. Dating Adrian felt like stepping into sunlight after years spent in shadows. He brought flowers, left little notes in my backpack, kissed me in front of people as if he were proud. At first, I told myself I didn't care when his friends snickered behind my back. Blake's charity case. Ugly duckling. Lips McGee. He had chosen me, hadn't he? That should have been enough. But one moment shattered everything. It was the last day of class before summer break. I'd texted Adrian that morning saying I was sick and wouldn't be coming. When he showed up at my apartment with orange juice, painkillers, and a small container of soup, I felt a flicker of hope. He kissed my forehead gently, whispering, "Rest, Marina. I'll be here." I wanted to believe him. Later, restless, I decided to attend class anyway. I slipped into the building quietly, trying to be invisible, but laughter erupted from inside as soon as I entered the hallway. Through the half-open door, I heard one of his friends call out, "Where's your ugly girl today?" Then Adrian's voice, light and joking, carrying far too easily. "She's sick. At least I don't have to kiss those giant lips today." The room exploded with laughter. My chest tightened so violently that I felt like I couldn't breathe. Without looking at anyone, I turned and walked away, swallowing my tears, my stomach twisting. That night, over a cheap pizza at a diner, he broke up with me as casually as if checking a box on a homework assignment. "It was fun, Marina," he said, picking at the crust. "But you're too much work. Don't take it personally." Too much work. The words burrowed under my skin, carving themselves into my bones. I shut myself in my room for days, replaying every smile, every compliment, every tender word he'd ever said. What I thought had been love was nothing but a cruel, orchestrated performance. But the universe has its ways. A week later, news spread across campus. Adrian Blake was dead. He'd been hiking near Oak Creek Canyon with 2 friends. Somehow he slipped. They found his body at the bottom of a cliff, skull fractured, legs bent at grotesque angles. People mourned. Candles were lit. Flowers piled up like a tiny memorial. Me? I felt a smile curl across my lips. His death reminded me of other losses I'd survived, ones that had shaped the person I'd become. When I was 9, my Chihuahua Pico died suddenly. The night before, my cousin, who loved him dearly, had gone out of town. The vet had said it was poisoning. At 17, my best friend Leah promised she'd keep in touch when she moved away, but their car spun out on the freeway. She died instantly. Both times, the people I loved most had tried to leave me, and both times fate had intervened. Adrian? I didn't touch him. I never laid a hand on him, but deep down, I understood the truth. The universe listens when I hurt. It answers in the language it knows best. Loss. When I picture Adrian's body at the bottom of that canyon, I feel a strange satisfaction. Not because I wanted him dead, but because finally the scales had tipped. He had dangled love in front of me, made me believe in something tender, then laughed as he ripped it away. What did he expect? That I would forgive? Forget? Keep living with his voice inside my head, mocking me, tearing me down, making me feel small? The world doesn't work that way. Not for me. Not anymore. That night I looked in the mirror. My lips trembled as I smiled, ugly or not, and I realized something vital. No one leaves me. Not without paying. And if the universe ever forgets to step in again, I won't hesitate to remind it. I never realized that moving out on my own could feel like freedom and punishment rolled into one. It was the fall of 2016 when I stuffed my life into a few cardboard boxes and left behind the quiet, wooded hills of Virginia. I told myself I wanted change, that I wanted to chase something bigger than the tiny town I grew up in. But if I'm being honest, I think I just wanted distance. From my family, from the memories that still gnawed at me, from all the things I couldn't fix no matter how hard I tried. I landed in a small Pennsylvania city, big enough to disappear in, small enough that it didn't chew you up and spit you out. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in this old brick building that smelled permanently of dust and overcooked cabbage drifting from the neighbors' kitchens. The floors whined whenever I crossed them, and the heater coughed to life at night like it was on its last breath. But it was mine. For the first time, the silence around me belonged only to me. I worked part-time at a bookstore while finishing classes at the community college. The job wasn't glamorous. Restocking shelves, scanning barcodes, nodding politely at customers who asked for books they couldn't remember the title of. But it covered rent, and most mornings I grabbed cheap coffee from the cafe down the street, tucked my hair behind my ears, and tried to convince myself I wasn't just another 20-something drifting without a map. That's where I met him. Ethan Hale. The first time he walked in, I noticed him instantly. Not because he was loud, but because he didn't fit. He wasn't like the other college guys who stumbled in for used textbooks or comic books. There was a sharpness to him, like he carried the air of someplace else. Broad shoulders, a strong jawline, dark hair cut neat and precise. His eyes were so dark, they seemed almost black. And they didn't just look at you, they lingered. He wore a beat-up leather jacket, the kind that told stories without saying a word. When he smiled at me, something in the room shifted. "Hey," he said casually, sliding a novel across the counter. His voice was calm, steady. "Do you actually recommend this? Or is it just one of those books people buy to sound smart?" I let out a quick laugh. "Honestly, it's overrated. The author kind of likes listening to himself talk." His grin widened, and just like that, I was caught. We started talking more. At first it was light, him asking about books, me finding excuses to stretch out the conversation. Then one evening he leaned on the counter and asked, "You want to grab coffee after your shift?" I said yes before I even thought about it. Things with Ethan moved quickly, like water rushing downhill. Within weeks, he was showing up at my apartment with takeout, hanging around until the early hours. By Christmas, he was practically living there. He told me I made him feel grounded, that being with me reminded him of home, though he never actually said where home was. His past was always a blurred outline. He'd say his childhood was complicated, that he moved around too much, that family wasn't really part of his life anymore. I didn't push him. I understood the urge to bury what hurts, but small things began to surface. He didn't like when I went out without telling him. He bristled around my male friends, said they looked at me the wrong way. If I didn't answer his text right away, my phone would buzz with call after call until I picked up. Once I left my phone in the bathroom while showering, and when I came out, he was standing there accusing me of ignoring him. At first, his intensity felt flattering, like he cared too much. Isn't that what love is? Caring, maybe even obsessively. But then came the temper. The first time I saw it, we were cooking dinner together. I knocked a glass off the counter. It shattered across the tile. He froze, then slammed his fist into the wall so hard the picture frame rattled. "God damn it," he barked, eyes flashing. "You need to be more careful." My stomach dropped. I stood there, pulse hammering in my throat, staring at the way his face twisted into something sharp and unfamiliar. And then, just as fast, he softened. He kissed my forehead, his voice suddenly gentle. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to scare you. I get stressed sometimes." I forgave him. Of course I did. That became the rhythm of us. He'd explode, then apologize. He'd frighten me, then pull me back in with tenderness. And every single time I told myself the same thing. It was just a bad day, just stress, just me overthinking. But the truth was darker than I wanted to admit, something unraveling slowly beneath the surface of us. One night in February, I woke to find Ethan sitting on the edge of the bed. He wasn't moving, just staring at me, his eyes wide and unblinking, like he was memorizing every detail of my face. My voice cracked as I whispered, "What's wrong?" Groggy, half asleep, I expected him to laugh it off. He didn't, not at first. Then he leaned close, so close I felt his breath against my ear and whispered, "You're not going to leave me. Ever. Right?" I swallowed, my throat tight. "Of course not." His lips curved into a smile. He kissed me, then laid back down as if nothing had happened. But my body stayed rigid beneath the blankets. I couldn't shake the tone in his voice. It wasn't a question, it was a warning. By spring, the cracks were no longer cracks. They were gaping splits I couldn't ignore. Ethan started showing up at the bookstore unannounced, lingering in the aisles under the excuse of just checking in. When I wasn't looking, he'd thumb through my phone. If I so much as mentioned another man's name, his jaw would tighten and his body would stiffen like a drawn bow. Claire, my closest friend from class, noticed. One afternoon in the library, she studied me longer than the textbook in front of her. "You're quieter lately," she said. "Are you okay? Is it Ethan?" I hesitated. Then I shook my head, forcing a smile. "No, it's fine. He's just intense." "Intense how?" she pressed, her brow furrowed. I shrugged, pretending it didn't matter. But the truth burned inside me. I didn't know how to explain that Ethan made me feel like the most important person alive one moment, and like his prisoner the next. The breaking point came in June. We were arguing in my apartment because I'd gone out with Claire after class instead of coming straight home. His jaw clenched, his fists balled at his sides. "You think she cares about you more than I do?" His voice was sharp, venomous. "She doesn't know you like I do. No one does. No one ever will." "Ethan, you're scaring me," I whispered, backing into the kitchen. He followed, eyes blazing. "Good. Maybe you should be scared. Maybe then you'll stop running off with other people and remember who you belong to." My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. "I'm calling someone." His face changed instantly. He stepped back, forced a smile, muttered, "I didn't mean that. God, I just don't want to lose you. Please don't make me the bad guy." But in that moment, something clicked cold inside me. He wasn't afraid of being the bad guy. He was afraid of being caught. After that, I tried to pull away. I told him I needed space, that I wanted to focus on school. He didn't take it well. At first, my phone blew up with hundreds of texts in one night, voicemails begging me to answer. Then came the anger, threats that he'd show up at my job, warnings that I couldn't just erase him like he was nothing. One night, I came home late and saw him sitting on the stairwell outside my building, just sitting in the dark, waiting. "Ethan," I whispered, my whole body freezing. "What are you doing here?" He stood, shadows cutting across his face. "Making sure you got home safe. I worry about you." I forced a weak laugh. "You can't just wait outside like this. It's creepy." His smile cracked. "Creepy? After everything I've done for you, that's what I am now?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The last time I saw him was in July. I finally cut him off completely, blocked his number, changed my locks, begged Claire to stay with me for a while. For a brief stretch, it worked. The silence felt strange, almost heavy, but it was relief all the same. Then one night I woke to a sound at the window, a faint tapping. My stomach dropped. I froze, listening. The tapping stretched into a scrape, like fingertips dragging across the glass. Claire stirred beside me. "What's that?" she mumbled. I forced myself to look. Ethan was standing on the fire escape, his face pressed against the glass, his dark eyes locked on mine. I screamed. Claire screamed. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They told me there wasn't much they could do. He hadn't broken in, hadn't laid a hand on me. They suggested a restraining order but warned it might only provoke him. That was when I realized how powerless I really was. It's been years since then. I moved to a different city, changed my number, cut ties with anyone who might connect me back to him. Piece by piece, I built a new life. But at night, when the house is quiet, I still hear that tapping on the glass. I still see his black eyes staring in at me. And in crowded streets, sometimes I swear I feel him watching. Because people like Ethan don't just disappear, they linger, like shadows, like scars. And no matter how far you run, you never truly escape. I never thought I'd put this into words, but holding it inside for so long has poisoned me in ways I can't fully explain. Maybe if I finally lay it out, the weight will ease a little. My name is Daniel Rains. Back in 2016, I was 24, fresh out of college, newly hired as a junior accountant, and living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment near downtown Columbus, Ohio. My life was steady, ordinary, maybe even painfully predictable. Safe, yes, but lonely. I'd always been the quiet one, the guy who melted into the back of the classroom, scribbled notes, never raised his hand, never stood out. I wasn't unattractive, but I wasn't the kind of man people's eyes lingered on either. All through high school and college, I watched the confident, charming guys, ones with easy smiles, money, and social grace, drift seamlessly into relationships while I stayed invisible, orbiting in the background. So when graduation ended and real adulthood began, I made a silent promise to myself. This is the year I'll change. This is the year I'll find someone. That determination pushed me to download a handful of dating apps. I uploaded pictures where I tried to look relaxed and confident, though in truth the tightness in my shoulders gave me away. Most of the time, my messages floated into the void. Never read, never answered. Until one night I got a match. Her name was Elena Morris. Her profile picture made me pause. She didn't look like someone you stumbled across online. She looked like someone out of a dream, or a magazine spread. Long black hair that shimmered under soft lighting. Olive-toned skin. Green eyes so sharp they seemed to pierce straight through me. Her bio was short, but it hooked me. Book lover. Night owl. Looking for someone genuine. When the first message came from her, I thought it was some kind of scam. Elena. Hey, I like your smile. You seem sweet. Want to chat? I stared at those words for almost 10 minutes, my mind spinning, palms clammy against my phone. Then I typed back. Me. Me? Sure. Honestly, didn't think someone like you would swipe right on someone like me. She sent a quick reply, followed by a string of haha, like laughter caught mid-breath. That tiny reaction felt electric, and then the conversation just flowed. For the first time, I wasn't forcing small talk. She asked about my childhood, about the movies I rewatched when I couldn't sleep, about what kept me up at night. She told me she used to be awkward in high school, an outcast, a bookworm with braces, and how she knew what it felt like to be overlooked. We talked every single night for a week, and for the first time in my life I felt something I'd never felt before. Chosen. When Elena suggested meeting in person, I almost dropped the phone. Wait, you're serious? I asked, my voice cracking with disbelief. Of course I'm serious, she teased, her voice smooth, playful, almost daring. What's the point of talking forever if we never meet? Come on, Daniel. Take me somewhere nice. We agreed on a cafe near the Ohio State campus. I remember standing outside that evening, my palms slick with sweat, scanning the street and half expecting no one to show. Or worse, that I'd been catfished. But then the door opened, and she walked in. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. She was even more breathtaking in person, tall, poised, moving with a grace that seemed rehearsed yet effortless. And then of all the people in that room, her eyes locked on me. She smiled like she'd been waiting for this moment. Daniel? She asked softly. I nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah. Hi. She sat across from me, and suddenly the world shrank down to just the two of us. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. She laughed at my clumsy jokes, leaned in when I faltered, brushed my hand when I got too nervous. Every second with her carried this unreal glow, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. When the cafe staff started stacking chairs and sweeping floors, I offered to walk her home. She leaned close, her voice low enough to stir the air against my ear. Or, she whispered, we could go to your place instead. My heart hammered. I live alone, I stammered. Her lips curved into a slow, mischievous smile. Perfect. The moment we stepped into my apartment, she kissed me. Hard. Everything that followed blurred into something feverish, too intense, too consuming, too much for me to process. For her, it felt natural, practiced, like she'd done this countless times before. For me, it was my first. But what lingers most in my memory isn't the intimacy. It's something else entirely. It was the silence that unsettled me most. Afterward, she slipped her clothes back on with practiced precision, not a word spoken, not even a glance in my direction. No soft laughter, no lingering brush of her hand, no warmth left behind. Just the sound of fabric sliding over skin, then her standing by the door with a strange, unreadable smile. See you soon, she said quietly. Then she was gone. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my chest tightening with confusion. Something about her detachment gnawed at me, but I swallowed it down. I told myself I was lucky, that maybe this was how confident, experienced people behaved, that it was me who didn't know the rules. The following days crawled by, each one more agonizing than the last. Elena barely answered my texts, sometimes only sending back an emoji or a one-word reply. My stomach twisted with insecurity. By the third day, I broke. Me. Did you enjoy the other night? Or was it just me? Her reply came back within seconds, faster than I expected. Elena. Of course I did. You were amazing. Don't doubt that. Relief surged through me. My face burned with an almost childlike happiness. But then, another message blinked on my screen. Elena. Actually, I've been planning a little surprise. You're free tomorrow, right? I want to take you on a road trip. A road trip. With her. My ego soared. My doubts dissolved. Without thinking, I typed back, yes. The next evening, she pulled up outside my apartment. She looked impossibly put together. Tight jeans hugging her frame, a black leather jacket, a small purse slung over her shoulder. I glanced around for luggage, a bag, anything. There was nothing. You travel light, I joked nervously. Her lips curved into a smirk. I like to keep things spontaneous. We drove west, the city lights dissolving behind us until only dark wooded highways stretched ahead. The sun bled orange and red as it dipped beneath the horizon. For a while it felt like a dream. She laughed at my dumb comments, her hand brushing mine on the console. My chest swelled with something that felt almost like belonging. Then her touch shifted. Her hand lingered, slid slowly up my thigh, deliberate, hungry. My pulse thundered in my ears. Without thinking, I pulled onto a deserted stretch of road, the car headlights cutting pale beams through the trees. We kissed, frantic, breathless. I was consumed, lost, until something sharp tore through the haze, a stabbing pain, hot, shocking, right in my chest. I froze, pulled back, eyes dropping down. Elena was holding a knife. The blade glistened red. "What the Elena?" I gasped, clutching the wound. Her face twisted into something unrecognizable, caught between ecstasy and madness. "Shh," she whispered, eyes gleaming. "Don't ruin it. This is the best part." My throat tightened. "What the hell are you doing?" She giggled, a high, broken, chilling sound. "I've done this before. It's thrilling. You'll see. Your blood will cover me while we make love, and then I'll rest on your corpse." Terror surged through me like lightning. I shoved at her, adrenaline ripping through my body. She was stronger than she looked. The knife slashed across my arm, fire shooting through the cut. "Stop! Are you insane?" I screamed. Her eyes were wild, inhuman, shining with something predatory. "Don't fight it, Daniel, just let go." She lunged again, the blade grazing the skin of my neck. Panic overtook me. With every ounce of strength I had, I gripped her wrist, twisting, trying to wrench the weapon away. In the chaos, the knife slipped. She gasped, a strangled sound, as the blade sank into her throat. Time slowed to nothing. Her eyes widened, the madness faltering into raw shock. Blood poured in thick streams down her chest. She choked, gurgling, her body trembling violently. Without thinking, without even realizing what I was doing, I yanked the knife free and, in blind terror, drove it into her again and again. I needed to be sure she wouldn't get back up. When the frenzy drained out of me, reality crashed in. She was dead. Elena, the woman I thought was my dream, my chance at love, lay slumped in the passenger seat, her skin already cooling, her eyes still open. My stomach lurched, my vision tunneled. Prison, headlines, my life over. I panicked. I drove. I drove until the roads grew narrow, until I reached a cliff overlooking a black river. With trembling hands, I dragged her body into the driver's seat, set the car in neutral, and pushed. The vehicle rolled forward slowly, then tipped, vanishing over the edge. The crash below was muffled, swallowed by the rushing water. The river closed over it, erasing her. I stood there in the dark, chest bleeding, arm burning, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. My car, my possessions, my first lover, all gone in a single night. Somehow, I made it back home. I stitched my wounds with trembling hands, terrified of hospitals, of questions I couldn't answer. For weeks I waited for sirens, for detectives, for her name to appear on the news. But it never came. No missing posters, no investigation. It was like she had never existed. But I know she did. I see her face every time I close my eyes. I hear her laugh in the silence. I feel that knife pierce me again whenever I think about letting anyone close. That was 6 years ago. I haven't dated since. I don't go out. I don't trust anyone. Because I've learned the truth. Beauty can hide monsters. And sometimes the person you dream of loving isn't there to save you. They're there to destroy you. I never imagined I'd let someone tear me apart piece by piece, but that's exactly what happened. It's embarrassing to admit now, though back then, I couldn't see it clearly. I was naive, hungry for love, and far too willing to hand my trust to people who hadn't earned a scrap of it. To explain how I ended up in the mess I did, I have to go back to the version of me that existed before everything unraveled. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment wedged above a liquor store in Columbus, Ohio. My mom raised me alone. She was kind, but there was a heaviness about her, like loneliness had set up camp inside her and refused to leave. My dad left before I was old enough to have a memory of his face. Mom worked long shifts as a nursing assistant. By the time she got home, she was exhausted, smelling faintly of antiseptic and sweat. Most nights she'd collapse onto the couch with a cheap glass of Merlot and a man beside her. There were always men. Some stuck around for weeks, others for a few months. They carried the same traits: impatience in their eyes, stale beer on their breath, and irritation when they realized I came as part of the package. I learned early that survival meant staying invisible. When voices rose, I slipped into my room, closed the door, and prayed the shouting didn't turn into something worse. If I was quiet, I was safe. But being invisible as a child did something ugly to me as an adult. It left me starving to be seen, to be chosen. By 24, I was working a string of dead-end jobs, living alone in a tiny studio apartment that smelled faintly of mildew, and aching for someone to look at me and really see me. That's why when Daniel Mercer walked into my life, I let him in too quickly. It was the summer of 2016. I was working part-time at a coffee shop when he appeared, tall and broad-shouldered, with slick dark hair combed back like he'd stepped out of a black and white film. He carried himself with a confidence that made people glance twice. But what disarmed me was his tone when he spoke. Warm, almost gentle. He ordered black coffee every morning for 2 weeks straight before asking my name. "You always smile when you hand me this cup," he said one morning, leaning against the counter. His eyes locked on mine, unblinking. "Makes the coffee taste better. What's your secret?" I laughed, heat rising in my face. "No secret, just doing my job." "No, it's more than that," he said softly. "Trust me." That was how it started. A few days later, he asked for my number. Our first date was at a dingy diner near my place, and I nearly choked on a milkshake from laughing so hard at his jokes. He told me about growing up in Indiana, about his father leaving when he was young. "Guess I've got a temper," he admitted once with a crooked smile, "but only when people push me." I brushed past it. I was already hooked. The first month was intoxicating. He brought flowers, scribbled notes he'd taped to my door, and told me I was beautiful in ways no one else ever had. For the first time in my life, I felt chosen, seen. But then cracks began to show. It started small. One evening my phone buzzed, and his head snapped up. "Who's texting you?" "My friend Maya," I said, showing him the screen. He smirked, not quite convinced. Later, he said, "You don't need friends who distract you from us. We've got something special. Don't let anyone ruin it." I laughed it off, but within weeks he wanted to know everything. Where I was, who I spoke to, why I took so long to reply. If I wore something he didn't like, he'd say, "You're really going out in that? Don't you care what people think?" If I said something he disagreed with, he'd go quiet, stare at me with narrowed eyes until I scrambled to fix it. Each time I told myself he was just protective, that it came from love. By November, 4 months in, I invited Daniel over for dinner at my apartment. I made pasta, lit candles, even splurged on a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford. At first, the night was perfect. We laughed, talked about taking a trip together. For a moment, I believed everything might be okay. Then my phone buzzed, Maya again. Daniel's smile faltered. "You can't even go one night without talking to other people?" His voice snapped sharp, unexpected. I froze. "It's just my friend." "Yeah, your friend," he sneered, mocking the word. "You think I don't see what's going on? You light up when you talk about her. What is it? Are you into her now?" My stomach dropped. "Daniel, that's ridiculous." He slammed his hand against the table so hard the wine glasses rattled. My neighbor's dog barked through the wall, and the sound jolted through me like a warning. My whole body tightened, bracing for Daniel's next outburst, but instead he let out a long sigh and dragged his hand through his hair. "Sorry, babe," he muttered, his voice softer now, almost defeated. "I don't know what gets into me sometimes. I don't want to lose you." The sharp edge of fear dulled, replaced by the old familiar ache of wanting to fix him. Somehow I found myself comforting him, whispering reassurances I barely believed. That became our cycle. Over the next year, Daniel peeled me away from the rest of the world. It wasn't sudden, it was slow, deliberate. He didn't like Maya, so I stopped answering her texts. He didn't like the late shifts at the coffee shop, so I quit and found another job with hours that suited him. He told me one night, arms tight around my waist, "It's just us. That's all we need." I wanted to believe that. But the truth was, I felt myself shrinking inside those walls, gasping for air. Still, I stayed. Because each time he tore me down, he rebuilt me with roses, with apologies, with promises I'd spent my whole life waiting to hear. "You're the only one who understands me. I love you more than anything." Those words kept me tethered until the night everything came apart. It was March 2017. Daniel had been restless all day, pacing the apartment, snapping over little things like a dish left on the counter or the way I folded laundry. The tension was suffocating. Then around 9, there was a knock at the door. I thought it was the landlord. But when I opened it, a woman stood there. Mid-30s, hair tangled, eyes red and swollen like she hadn't slept in days. She looked straight through me with raw hatred. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Excuse me," I stammered. "Don't play dumb." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Where's Daniel?" Confused, I turned, and there he was behind me. His face had gone pale. "Claire," he muttered, barely audible. "Go home." "Claire," she snapped, correcting him sharply, her eyes cutting back to me. Then her voice rose, wild. "This is her, isn't it? This is the girl you've been screwing while I'm at home." Losing my mind, my stomach dropped, cold spreading through me. What is she talking about?" Daniel's hand closed around my arm. "Ignore her. She's crazy. She's my ex. She's been stalking me." "I'm your wife," Claire screamed, her throat raw with rage. "Don't you dare lie to her." Wife. The word detonated in my chest. He never told me he was married. Before I could process it, Claire lunged, grabbing my hair and yanking so hard my eyes blurred with tears. "You think you can steal him from me?" she shrieked. "Stop! Get off her!" Daniel yelled, but he didn't move fast enough. Claire shoved me down, and I curled on the floor instinctively as her boot lifted like she was about to stomp me. I screamed, covering my head. At the last second, Daniel yanked her back. They collided, thrashing in my tiny living room, their voices exploding into chaos. You lied to me, I cried out, tears burning hot. She is crazy, he shouted, struggling to hold Claire's wrists as she kicked and spat curses. You don't know what she's like. Crazy? Claire's voice broke as she fought against him. Her chest rose and fell like she couldn't catch air. Tell her about our marriage, Daniel. Tell her about the 3 years you promised me forever. Tell her how you still crawl back to me when you're bored of her. Ice filled my veins. My shaking hands fumbled for the phone on the floor, dialing 911. Please, I sobbed into the receiver. There's a woman in my apartment attacking me. Send someone. Claire thrashed and screamed. Daniel cursed, his face twisted as he tried to restrain her. I backed into the corner, heart hammering so hard the world blurred around me. Minutes stretched into eternity before the police arrived. When they pulled Claire out, still screaming, my legs gave out and I slid against the wall, gasping for breath. The officers were calm, professional. They took notes, asked questions, kept their voices even. Daniel insisted again and again that Claire was unstable, obsessed, that he was trying to move on and she couldn't handle it. But I couldn't stop shaking. My trust had snapped in two. You never told me you were married, I whispered when the police left, taking Claire into custody. My voice cracked on every word. Daniel sighed, rubbing his face. I was going to. It's complicated, okay? We're separated. The papers are filed. She just can't handle it. You lied to me, I said, the words trembling in the air. I didn't lie, he said firmly, stepping closer. I just didn't tell you everything yet. I didn't want to scare you off. I stared into his eyes, searching for something true, something human. But all I saw was manipulation, the same kind I grew up around. That night, I didn't sleep. Daniel stayed, insisting he was protecting me, but every time I closed my eyes I saw Claire's face, her fingers tangled in my hair, her scream echoing in the dark. The next morning, while he showered, I packed a bag. My hands shook the whole time. When he stepped out, towel wrapped around his waist, he frowned. Where are you going? I can't do this, I said, clutching my backpack like a shield. You lied. You dragged me into your mess. I can't live like this. His jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he'd erupt. But then he smiled. Cold. Certain. You'll be back, he said quietly. They always come back. I left without another word. It's been years since that night. I moved to another city, started therapy, cut Daniel out completely. But sometimes I still wake up in the dark, heart pounding, convinced I hear someone pounding on my door. The truth is, the horror wasn't just Claire's attack. The real horror was how easily I let someone like Daniel consume me. That's what keeps me up sometimes, that monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they hold your hand. Sometimes they tell you they love you. I never really believed in gut feelings. To me, that was the kind of thing people dramatized in novels or movies. This idea that your stomach twisted when something was wrong, that your chest tightened when danger was near. For most of my life, I treated everything like a puzzle that could be solved if you just looked closely enough. Logic, evidence, patterns, that's what I trusted. My mom used to shake her head at me and say, "One day, facts won't save you. You've got to learn to listen to your instincts." I'd laugh it off, tell her the world was explainable if you paid attention. I really believed that. Until I met Adrian Wells. To explain why I let him in, I need to explain who I was then. I grew up in Ashton, Illinois, a small town with one main street, 2 grocery stores, and enough gossip to make even the walls feel like they were listening. My dad walked out when I was 10, and my mom worked herself raw at a diner, raising me and my little brother Lucas. She was exhausted most nights, smelling of coffee and grease, but she never let us forget we were loved. At 20, I left Ashton for Riverside, a city 2 hours away, to attend community college. It wasn't glamorous. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, where the hum of the dryers below became a kind of endless white noise. I worked part-time at a bookstore, studied psychology at night, and called Mom every Sunday. I wasn't exactly lonely, but I ached for connection. My dating history was mostly high school awkwardness, half-hearted crushes that never lasted. By Riverside, I wanted something real, someone who would choose me out of everyone else. That's when Adrian appeared. It was at a classmate's party, the kind where music pounds too loud and people drink from red plastic cups until the floor feels like it's swaying. I remember standing by the window, watching rain streak down the glass, thinking about sneaking out without anyone noticing. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "You look like you're about to disappear." I turned. He was tall, clean-cut, dark hair curling slightly at the edges. His smile was warm, though it looked a little too practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. He wasn't sloppy drunk like the rest of them. He seemed calm, composed, as though the whole room bent toward him without him even trying. "I'm just not great at parties," I admitted. "That makes two of us," he said easily, though something about him told me he was lying. He looked like the kind of person who thrived in any room. Still, he leaned against the wall beside me, giving me his full attention, and for once I didn't feel invisible. His name was Adrian Wells. He wasn't in school. Said he worked as a freelance photographer. "I like catching people when they're unguarded," Winnie told me, "the way they really are, when they don't know they're being watched." We talked for hours while people stumbled drunkenly around us. We sat on the floor by the window trading stories about books, family, the future. He confessed he loved philosophy, read Nietzsche and Camus when he couldn't sleep. But it wasn't just the things he said. It was how he listened. He asked about my childhood, my dreams. And when I spoke, his gaze locked on mine like nothing else existed. By the time the party thinned out, he walked me outside. The rain had stopped, but the street still glistened under the lamplight. "Can I see you again?" he asked. His voice was steady, but his expression had this boyish hope to it. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. Our first date was at a tiny cafe I'd never noticed before, tucked away on a quiet corner. Adrian said he liked hidden gems, places untouched by the world. The cafe had mismatched chairs, chalkboard menus, and a stillness that made it feel separate from time. Conversation with him flowed effortlessly. He made my words feel important, like I wasn't just filling silence. By the end of the night, I felt both relieved and electrified. Someone had finally found me. After that, we were inseparable. Adrian showed up at the bookstore after shifts, leaning against the counter with that easy smile. He brought me coffee late at night while I studied or slipped handwritten notes under my door. "You're different," he told me more than once. "Everyone else feels shallow, but you're real." For someone who'd always felt ordinary, those words burned into me like fire. But then came the cracks. Small things at first. "Who are you texting?" he'd ask, casually, glancing at my phone when it buzzed. "You didn't answer when I called." "What were you doing?" He always said it lightly, his lips curled in a smile, but his eyes were sharp, unblinking. And slowly, the questions sharpened into accusations. If I showed up late, his jaw would tighten, his voice clipped. "You don't value my time, do you?" If I mentioned spending time with friends, Adrian would tilt his head and smile like he was being playful, but his words always carried weight. "Why do you need them when you have me?" I laughed it off the first few times, telling myself it was because he cared, because this was what people in relationships did. They wanted to be involved, to matter. But a part of me knew the tone wasn't casual. There was an edge to it, something controlling buried beneath the sweetness. One evening, we were sitting together in the library. My textbooks were spread out in front of me, highlighters scattered across the table while Adrian had only a notebook open. I realized after a while that he wasn't reading or writing. He was watching. Not me. Other people. His eyes followed strangers as they walked past, tracking them with unnerving intensity, like he was cataloging every gesture. "What are you doing?" I whispered, glancing around nervously. His lips curved into a grin. "Just observing. Everyone has patterns. If you look close enough, you can tell what someone's thinking." A chill slid down my spine. He meant it. Adrian loved talking about crime too. He'd bring up infamous cases and recount details with a kind of fascination that unsettled me. Once, while we were watching a horror movie, he said, "Isn't it amazing how someone can just vanish? One moment they're here, and the next, it's like they never existed." I laughed, trying to lighten the mood, but he didn't laugh back. His expression stayed cold, serious, and then, almost too late, he smiled. "I'm joking. Don't look so scared." But the unease clung to me long after the movie ended. Another time, he showed me a drawer in his apartment filled with knives. Different shapes, different sizes, polished to a shine. He slid a finger along one blade, admiring it. "Each one has a story," he said softly. "But they haven't written their real story yet." "Adrian, that's disturbing," I managed, my throat tight. He looked at me with a focus so intense I had to look away. Then he said in a low voice, "Don't worry. You're special. I'd never hurt you." But the way he said it didn't soothe me. It made my skin crawl. One Friday night, he insisted he had something planned, somewhere special. He drove us out of the city, down winding roads, until we pulled into an abandoned park. The air was thick with silence, the trees stretching high and skeletal around us. As we walked down a broken path, Adrian leaned close, his voice low. "You know how fragile life is?" he whispered. "One push, one fall, and it could all be over. And no one would ever know." "Adrian, stop. You're scaring me," I said, my voice trembling. He smiled, brushing his hand across my cheek like it was a tender moment. "I'm just sharing my thoughts. You inspire me. You make me feel alive." When I turned to leave, his hand shot out, gripping my arm, hard. "You don't understand," he said, voice flat, eyes burning. "I need you. You're my muse. Without you, I'm nothing." And then, in a single terrifying instant, his hand wrapped around my throat. He shoved me against a tree, his face inches from mine, eyes wild with something that was part passion, part madness. "I could make you disappear right now," he whispered. Panic surged through me. My nails clawed at his arms, my feet kicked against him. My chest burned, my vision blurred. The world shrank to nothing but his grip. Just when I thought I was slipping away, I slammed my knee into his crotch. He gasped, releasing me. I stumbled, sucked in air, and ran. Branches tore at my arms. My lungs screamed for breath, but I didn't stop. Behind me, his laughter rose, echoing, taunting, almost gleeful. I burst onto the main road, waving desperately. A car slowed. An older couple pulled over, eyes wide as they saw my state. Between gasps and sobs, I told them everything. They drove me straight to the police. But at the station, as I sat shaking, the officers didn't look convinced. "He strangled you, then just let you go?" one asked, skeptical. "Yes, I hit him. I got away. He was going to kill me." They wrote down my statement, their pens scratching, but their voices carried doubt. I left the station feeling more alone than I had in my entire life. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside my window made me flinch. Every shadow stretched too long. My parents begged me to come home, and within a week I packed up my tiny apartment and left Riverside behind. Years passed. I rebuilt myself, finished school, found steady work, learned to tuck Adrian into the darkest corners of my memory. I told myself he was gone, that he was just a nightmare I had escaped. And then, one night, years later, his face appeared again. I was flipping through TV channels when a rerun of an old dating show came on. The screen lit up with Adrian's smile, the same practiced warmth, the same sharp eyes that once locked onto mine. He laughed, flirted, charmed the audience. For a moment, my body froze. Then the anchor's voice cut in. Adrian Wells, later convicted of multiple murders, appeared on this show just months before his first known victim. My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. The monster I had narrowly escaped was real. He had gone on to do exactly what he'd hinted at with that chilling smile. And as I sat frozen in front of the screen, I realized something horrible. I hadn't been unlucky to meet him. I had been lucky to survive him. But that thought brought no comfort because in the back of my mind, I could still hear his voice, low and certain. "You're special. I won't let you go."